Chapter 19. The only game in town. Book 3 of the Spirit Flyer series. Chapter 18 was Daniel Robot Bailey. Chapter 19 is titled The Moment of Glory. We'll see what happens, eh? It ain't looking good, right? Sitting up where I can get to it easier. Daniel stayed in his room the rest of the day. His mother was jubilant that he was not only number one, but an official superstar. Denise's team had won in the girls' division, and she was a superstar too. Besides that, she had gone all the way up to rank number 12 in just a few hours. Mrs. Bailey had splurged and bought 2 point breakdown printout sheets, one before and one after the game. They were still talking about it when Daniel came downstairs. No doubt about it, I've got 2 superstar kids, Mrs. Bailey beamed. And that makes you a superstar mother, Denise replied. She was still studying her 2nd point breakdown sheet. Being the sister of the person who's number 1 really helps, Denise said. Look at all the points I got. It's under the family category. Mrs. Bailey smiled and nodded as she read the figure. I just knew Daniel would make his new point show if he just tried hard enough. I was afraid that rank blank stuff would go on forever, but I knew he had it in him. Well, we better go. The award ceremony is starting up soon. We need to be on time so my superstars can collect the spoils of victory. Though his mother wanted him to ride to the award ceremony together, as a family, Daniel refused. He rode the Golden Goliath Super Wings bicycle to the athletic field alone. The place was jammed with cars and pickup trucks. He weaved through the parked cars past fenders and tailgates. At the field, the bleachers were already filled with people eating. The tables of food were set in front of the bleachers on the high school track. Out on the grass was a long speakers platform. A single microphone stood on a stand, and right behind the platform was a huge big board, bigger than the one in the toy store. It was raised up high, fastened between 2 poles. Big bright purple lights spelled out the messages, Welcome Superstars. The air seemed charged with different feelings for the town. A certain sadness that always came with the end of another summer, the new beginnings of another school year, the feelings of being older for the children entering a new grade, and for the parents realizing that their children were growing up so fast. But this was unlike the end of any other summer. There was an almost unspoken fear carried in every heart. In the weeks since the bank closed, the changes in the world seemed to be rushing like dark storm clouds on the horizon. People in the small town of Centerville wondered what those clouds held for them and when or if the storm would hit their town. Like most people, Daniel felt a sense of loss to see the summer end. The big brick school buildings loomed nearby. He looked forward to being back in school, to seeing the teachers and the books he would be reading. He felt safe in classrooms. Though he didn't like the weariness and boredom that sometimes came with schoolwork, he wanted to know how new ideas and master new skills, like ways to measure the volume of a sphere, or the mystery of how cells divides, or the wonder of looking at a whole new world under a microscope or seeing farther into distant space with a telescope. But all those feelings were just put aside as the big field lights came on and lit up the athletic field. The crowd cheered briefly, then went back to eating. Daniel forgot everything except the ceremony ahead, the ceremony that would honor secret lies. He saw Barry lingering around the bottom of the platform. The rest of the Cobra Club was gathered around their leader, laughing and talking. Other boys were talking to Barry too. Being chosen the most valuable player was quite an honor, and Barry was enjoying every second of it. Under bright field lights, Barry's white teeth lit up his smiles. Daniel rode out across the grass. We did it, Barry said with a grin, just like I told you. Yeah, Daniel said, trying to force a smile. Daniel parked his bike and got some food. He sat by himself on a metal folding chair. He ate and watched the activities around him. Some girls and boys were kicking a soccer ball behind the big board out in the middle of the field. The night started to get damp as darkness fell. Coach Carruthers stepped up to the microphone and turned it on. He coughed twice, then began to speaking. Please take your places and we'll get right on with the festivities. I'm sure these boys and girls want to get their awards sooner than later. Daniel climbed up on the platform with all the other Rockets. The winning girls team, the Cougars, sat on the other side of the platform. Barry, having been chosen as a team captain, sat next to Coach Goober. Daniel sat in the last chair on the end. Daniel looked in the stands and found his mother sitting in the front row. Near her was Mr. Cyrus Cutright. Next to him was Mrs. Happy. She was all smiles. His mother waved at Daniel and Denise and smiled proudly. The smells of hamburgers and hot dogs and fruit pies drifted across the platform. Coach Carruthers stood at the microphone and cleared his throat. The noise in the crowd died down. It's appropriate that we all be gathered together on the fields of competition for the celebration of character and excellence, the coach said in almost sacred tones. The events of the last few weeks around the world haven't left us much to celebrate in many ways, other than the fact that we're still here. The people in the crowd nodded and whispered, but thanks to Goliath Industries, we've been fortunate to hang on to the peace and the prosperity that we've all worked so hard to attain. The crowd stood to their feet and cheered. Whistles blew, hands clapped, the big board flashed on and off. Thanks, Goliath. The coach turned and looked at the flashing letters. The big board really just about says it all, Coach Carruthers says. Thanks, Goliath Industries. And thanks to all the swell kids and parents who've helped make the sports league a success. More applause broke out. Now let's get right down to honoring the superstars. He called out the names. He called out the names of the winning girls team first. They each came up and got a trophy and a certificate of membership in the Goliath Country Club, and a package of prize certificates from their local stores. The crowd applauded and cheered after each name was called. Daniel watched his mother clapping when it was Denise's turn to get her trophy. Then it was the Rockets' turn to be introduced. The Rockets are a team of real go-getters, Coach Carruthers announced, and Coach Goober has done a heck of a job in getting these boys into great shape in such a short time. Coach Goober nodded and waved his hairy hand as the crowd clapped. Thanks, Coach Goober, Mr. Carruthers said. Now let's give out the trophies. It gives me great pleasure to award not only a superstar trophy, but also the most valuable player award to Barry Smedlow. Barry stood up and swaggered to the microphone. He waved and smiled as the crowd applauded. They applauded extra loud when the big board flashed the message, Barry Smedlow, most valuable player. I'm just a player on a team of a bunch of great guys, Barry said into the microphone. We couldn't do it alone. No, Daniel said to himself, not without the help of those guys that you paid off. The crowd applauded madly once more as Barry sauntered back to his seat. One by one, the other boys were briefly introduced and called up to the microphone, and one by one they took their trophies and certificates for prizes. The last name announced was Daniel's. He limped carefully to the center of the tables to Coach Carruthers. The coach smiled and shook Daniel's hand. The last member on our team is Daniel Bailey, another newcomer to Centerville. The boy showed a lot of spunk. This boy showed a lot of spunk and courage out there. In fact, he overcame a slow start in the point system, but in recent days, through hard work and a lot of determination, this boy has achieved the coveted top rank on the big board as the new number one. The crowd cheered and applauded as the big board lit up with new message: Daniel Bailey, number one superstar. Daniel looked over the flashing lights. The crowd stood on their feet, wild with cheers. Daniel saw his mother clap, eyes filled with pride and tears. This was indeed the place of his dreams. He was in, accepted by all. This was his moment of glory. As he looked at his applauding mother, he noticed two children on the edge of the crowd, sitting on two old red bicycles. Daniel felt as if they were turning upside down when he saw Susan Kramer looking right into his eyes. Her simple look cut through all the pomp and circumstance of the occasion. Something burned deep inside Daniel's heart. The coach was talking, and Daniel felt himself slipping away. For a moment, he was high above the clouds in a bright blue sky, holding onto the handlebars of his Spirit flyer. The wind was on his face, and he was looking at a distant figure, a brightly lit figure, a kingly figure. That's when Daniel realized it was a king, the king's prince himself. Daniel had never seen such a glorious sight. The boy felt weak in his knees as the light shone out to him. And not only was there light, but there was music, as if thousands of voices were singing out praises to the king's prince. The boy's heart was deeply stirred. Oh, there's two more paragraphs. The applause jarred Daniel back to the athletic field, but the applause suddenly seemed empty and plain compared to the glory the boy had just glimpsed. Coach Carruthers shook his hand and asked if he had anything to say. Daniel stepped up to the microphone. The crowd paused and was suddenly quiet. Daniel looked at different faces in the crowd. His eyes went from his smiling, proud mother to Mrs. Happy and to Susan and John Kramer. Then Daniel looked inside himself. He saw the waiting king in the distance, but only for an instant. That's when the light shone so brightly in the boy's heart that he knew what he must do. He had known all along. Okay. Chapter 20, count down to 0. Just because my voice is not doing great, and I barely made it through that, I'm not going to read another one. It's a short one, but again, it's a short one, but oh well. So it's just like, you'll have to hang on until tomorrow night. Sorry, guys. Let me get this off of my keyboard. Anybody on? Anybody? Any new guys still? I thought there were 2 new people on. Not really new. Grant Bennett, 333. Never did explain why he has 333 in his name. Come on. Nobody. All right, good night. Oi. Oi, 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 oi. Oi. All right. Oi, good night.